Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight at UC Irvine's Crystal Cove Auditorium. My name is Aline Vo, and I'm a third-year human biology student following the pre-medical pathway, as well as the vice president of Anteaters for Life. I was originally serving as the moderator, representing the pro-life side of tonight's debate. With that, it is my profound honor to introduce tonight's speaker, Lila Rose. Lila is the founder and president of Live Action, the digital leader of the pro-life movement, with 8 million followers and over 2 billion lifetime video views. She began her advocacy as a teenager with a simple yet courageous mission: to expose the truth about abortion and defend the dignity of every human life. Today, that mission has become a national movement, reaching millions through investigative journalism, digital media campaigns, and powerful educational outreach. A fearless voice for the voiceless, Lila has testified before the United Nations, spoken on countless college campuses, and appeared across national media to challenge our culture's assumptions about life, love, and justice. Her unwavering conviction and passion for the pro-life cause has made her a leading voice in one of the most important human rights issues of our time. Lila is not only a champion for the preborn, she is a voice of hope for a generation that longs for truth, compassion, and moral clarity. It is a privilege to welcome her to our campus tonight. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Lila Rose. At this time, I'd like to hand it over to Lila, who will be giving us her opening statement.
Thank you so much, Aline and Julia, and thank you so much to Valeria and everybody here who has come this evening. I'm really excited to see everybody here. I will say I'm very, very bummed, as I'm imagining some of you are, that Destiny is not here tonight. I know it was unexpected, and it sounds like he had a flight issue. I'm not sure exactly, but he is not here. So in that sense, I would like to share some remarks, but really I'd like to make this a conversation, and I'm very excited, especially if you've come and you have a difference of opinion on abortion. I would love to hear from you. So most of this evening is going to be a Q&A. It's going to be a conversation where, as our lovely moderators have explained, you can come and actually ask questions and we'll do dialogue. But I will share with you, because you were told there would be a debate, I will share with you what my opening remarks would have been if Destiny had been here. If anybody here follows Destiny and knows his arguments on the issue of consciousness and how humanity is defined by consciousness, there may be some students here who share Destiny's view. Again, so grateful you are here. If that is the case, I would love to dialogue with you, and we'll truly hope that Destiny will reschedule with us in the future, because I would love the opportunity to do this in person with Destiny. That being said, I will share what my opening remarks would have been just to get us going. This is just 6-7 minutes here, and then I think we get to do Q&A. Is that right, ladies? Okay, excited for that. All right, so the question before us tonight is simple and urgent. Should abortion be legal? To answer that, we must first ask, what is abortion? Abortion is the intentional killing of a living human being in the womb. It is not health care. It is not freedom. It is the direct, violent ending of the most vulnerable human life, whether through dismemberment abortion, chemical starvation via the abortion pill, or lethal injection in the second or third trimester. Abortion happens over 2,800 times every single day in America. Over 1 million children every single year are killed by abortion. Abortion is homicide, the killing of a vulnerable and valuable human being. So the real question before us is this: should homicide, or the killing of an innocent human being, ever be legal? Let's begin with the most simple distillation of the pro-life argument, the case against abortion. Number one, it is always wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. It is always wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. Number two, abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. And number three, therefore, abortion is always wrong and it should be illegal. In short, killing preborn human beings should be illegal for all the same reasons that killing born human beings should be illegal. My opponent, Destiny, would have argued tonight that abortion should be legal until a child achieves consciousness, as he defines, around 20 weeks or so in utero, is his claim. He actually has conceded before that human life does begin at conception, which is when a new human being comes into existence. But he argues that a human being has no rights and no value until they develop what he considers a conscious experience. But these are false ideas, and bad ideas bear bad consequences. The reality is this: human consciousness is not binary. It develops gradually and fluctuates throughout life. If human rights depend on our current mental capacity, then a toddler is less of a human than an adult, or less of a person than an adult, and a comatose patient has no rights at all. That is not justice, that is barbarism. Individual human rights do not depend on consciousness. They depend on what and who we are, members of the human species. Every human being, regardless of size, age, dependency, or awareness, has dignity and the right to life. Biologically, this is settled science. A new human life begins at fertilization, as Destiny has agreed. That's not a belief, it's a fact. As The Developing Human, a medical textbook, explains, human development, quote, begins at fertilization. This highly specialized totipotent cell marks the beginning of each of us as an individual. At the moment of fertilization, there is new, unique DNA distinct from both parents. Sex, ethnicity, hair color, eye color, and countless other traits are all determined at that moment. You were you when you were a zygote. Legally, the U.S. Constitution guarantees that the right to life and equal protection belongs to every person. The 14th Amendment states, "Nor shall any state deprive any person of life without the due process of the law, nor deny to any person the equal protection of the law." When it was ratified in 1868, the term person was understood to mean all human beings, born and preborn. The Ohio legislature actually at the time explicitly called abortion child murder. Even Roe v. Wade acknowledged that if the preborn were recognized as persons under the Constitution, the case for abortion would collapse. Personhood has been established biologically, legally, and morally. The law must reflect that reality. To deny rights to some human beings based on function is to deny rights to all. If our value comes from what we can do rather than who we are, then every human life is at risk. Newborns, the elderly, people with disabilities or dementia, anyone who falls short of the arbitrary standard can be discarded. That is not progress. It's a human rights catastrophe. We've seen this before. Every genocide begins by redefining personhood. Dred Scott declared Black Americans weren't persons. The Nazis said Jews and the disabled weren't persons. Today's abortion regime declares that preborn children aren't persons. History shows us again and again where this road leads. The right to life is not granted by the powerful. It is not earned by our awareness or by our strength. The right to life belongs to every human by virtue of their humanity. Some may argue that there are groups of human beings that are not persons and therefore have no human rights, but this is nonsense. There's only one question that matters. Is the preborn child a human being? What else could he or she be? If the child is human, then that child is entitled to human rights. The Declaration of Independence says that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. First among them is the right to life. The government's purpose, its role, is to secure those fundamental human rights. If the government can declare that some humans have no rights, then no one's rights are safe. That is not justice, that is tyranny. Abortion is not some private choice. It is the licensed killing of one human by another, and the government has no authority to legitimize such violence. The state has no right to franchise the power to kill. The abortion industry is not healthcare. It is a profit-driven system of death. So, should abortion be legal? No. Not if we believe in science, not if we believe in equality, not if we believe in human rights, not if we believe that human rights belong to every human being, not just the strong, the wanted, or the self-aware. All human beings have the right to be legally protected from murder. We must end this injustice. We must protect the preborn, and let's build a world where every life is protected, welcomed, and loved. Thank you.
Thank you, Lila Rose. And good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us here tonight. My name is Julia Hernandez, and I am a third-year microbiology and immunology student who is also pursuing an economics degree, ultimately following the pre-medical pathway. Tonight, I had the privilege of serving as the moderator on behalf of the pro-choice stance. Again, unfortunately, Destiny will not be in attendance, but we will still proceed with the questions that Aline and I had prepared for the moderator-led discussion. So with that, let's begin with our first question. So Lila, in cases of rape or incest where fertilization occurs through non-consensual means, how do you define, if at all, a moral or ethical boundary at which abortion may be considered a form of restitution or recovery for the woman in response to the trauma she has endured?
Thank you for the question. So in the horrific case of rape or sexual violence of any kind, and there's a pregnancy that results from that rape, obviously the rapist needs to be fully held accountable, put behind bars for life, in my view. Whole other topic about penalties for rapists not being strong enough, et cetera. And that woman is a survivor. She's a victim and a survivor. If a pregnancy results, if a baby is conceived, that baby now becomes an innocent third party. So there is no penalty that should be levied against that baby. They're innocent. They didn't commit any crime. The crimes of your parents or your father in this situation, your biological father, doesn't change your value or your right to life. So that child should be protected by law. And there's some people who say, well, it's not compassionate to the woman who's a survivor of rape because she should have that abortion, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say abortion does not take away, it does not heal the trauma of rape. It doesn't take away that the rape happened. It didn't take away the trauma of the rape. Abortion is an additional trauma that kills a baby and can actually lead to future trauma potentially for that mother. So we're not healing or solving anything with the abortion. We're only committing further injustice.
Thank you. Okay, next question. One significant concern raised in the abortion debate is that carrying a pregnancy to term and potentially raising a child can deeply impact a woman's future, including her education, career prospects, and financial stability. How would you respond to situations where a child ends up without adequate support because the mother was unable to reach financial or personal stability as a result of the pregnancy itself?
It's very tough because there are a lot of children today and families today that are struggling in our country and across the world, of course, but we're talking, obviously today mostly about our country. And those are can be really tough situations, and I firmly believe in the importance of helping, serving, helping. The pro-life movement, as an example, has thousands of pregnancy resource centers that provide confidential pro bono free medical care and other material resources to moms, like diapers, wipes, formula, parenting classes, job search and support, things like this. I support, doing cash stipends for parents. I think there should be not just tax cuts, but like cash stipends that the government gives. So we could talk about public policy. But abortion, the direct and intentional killing of a baby, is never a solution to poverty or to any other challenges we might face in any society. There is poverty that we have to contend with. There is inequalities that are unfair in our systems, maybe, that we need to contend with. But we don't contend with them or solve them by killing babies, by saying, well, let's kill off these would-be poor children. Let's kill off these would-be, children that have difficult lives. The reality is they are children now as unborn babies, and they deserve to live. So our society should, instead of focusing on violence as an answer to societal issues, we should focus on actually solving those societal issues.
Thank you. And for my third and final question, women often carry the burden of hormonal birth control despite the side effects. Should men be held to a similar standard when it comes to preventing unintended pregnancies? And should pro-life advocacy do more to promote or encourage the development of male contraceptives?
So I think the most foolproof contraceptive is called abstinence. And we in this room all possess something called self-control, which is a gift. And I think it's a very broken view of the human person and human sexuality to say that we can't control ourselves, and that because of that and because of the contraception fails and we have the right to kill the baby. I think that's a completely broken system. We all have a responsibility to personal responsibility. We all have to live a personal responsibility. And so I think the conversation should instead be to encourage people, if you're not ready to be a parent, if you're not willing to be a parent, you should not be engaging in the activities that create children, and that would make you a parent.
Thank you. And that concludes my portion, so I will hand it off to Aline.
Thanks so much.
So now I'll be asking my 2 questions for Lila. And my first one is, many people say they're personally pro-life, but don't want to impose that view on others. What would you say to someone who's on the fence morally, but hesitant to take a stand publicly?
Thank you. So listen, if there was let's say a situation of child abuse, there is, a child that's being abused, and would it be okay for somebody to say, well, I'm personally against abusing children. I wouldn't abuse a child, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. That would be ridiculous, right? You should be able to say, no, you should not abuse your child. I should not abuse a child, and it should be illegal to abuse children. Similarly with abortion, saying, well, I would not kill a baby, I would not have an abortion, but someone else, it's okay, it's not, that's up to them. It's the same flaw to say that, well, it's okay, not okay for someone else, it's okay for someone else to do it, but not okay for me. That is a human life, and abortion takes their life, and that human life has a right to life, and laws are supposed to protect fundamental human rights. So I would encourage anyone who's personally pro-life to say, first challenge them and say, you're actually not personally pro-life, you're actually for abortion for other people if they choose it. So I would call that actually pro-choice or pro-abortion choice. You could say it's definitely pro-abortion. And I would encourage them to stop sitting on the sidelines and say, listen, there's 3,000 abortions a day. These are human beings that deserve to live. We need legal protection, and then let's get in the game to educate and support people to choose life, because these lives matter and these children's lives matter.
Thank you for your answer, Lila. And my second question is, some critics say the pro-life movement ignores the role of men in unplanned pregnancies. How would you respond to that, and what role do you believe men should play in protecting life?
Thank you. Well, again, I think even this idea of an unplanned pregnancy, right? Like, oh, oops, how did I get pregnant? How could I have possibly gotten pregnant? It's very likely, well, it's absolutely necessary that you are engaging in an activity that creates life, right? So I think the whole framework today around the conversation about pregnancy is very broken, because we talk about safe sex being sex that involves a condom that's somehow going to protect you in some way, and obviously they don't always work. You can get pregnant, and also there's a lot of, from sex outside of marriage especially, there's a high STI rate that can occur. There's a lot of emotional issues you can develop by hooking up with people that you don't end up with for life. I mean, there's a whole world we could talk about there. So this idea, like, what responsibility should men take for unplanned pregnancies? The first responsibility a man or a woman should take is for their actions. And I would encourage people, like, guys, we can do this. We can choose to not have sex. We have that superpower. It's okay. You will live without sex. And if you find the love of your life and you want to build a family, go for it. And sex belongs in a lifelong commitment where you can be open to children and build a family together. It's an incredible design, right? That said, if there's a situation where a woman gets pregnant, it's not just her child, there's also his child, right? There's a father. And so I think men absolutely have a responsibility to any child that they help conceive and to the woman who's carrying that child. So I would argue that spousal support, or in this case, child support, that a man would owe at birth, he should owe before that. And we should include both men and women in the responsibility of carrying life, and we should also ensure that legally that life is protected and not in danger of abortion.
Thank you for your answer, Lila, and thank you for answering both of our moderator-led questions. And now we will be opening the floor to the open mic Q&A. So if you have a question you'd like to ask Lila, Lorenzo, Aaron, Julia, and I will be walking around with microphones. And if you keep your hand raised, we will call you over to the side of the aisle where you may speak into the microphone and ask your question.
Does anybody want to play Destiny? Let's do it. You don't need to have blue hair to be Destiny. You can do the argument. I know you can.
All right, I will play Destiny.
All right, fantastic.
Okay.
What's your name?
Alex.
Alex. Thank you, Alex.
So thank you for coming to UCI, by the way.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm a liberal in the classical definition of the term, and one topic that comes to question is, where do our rights originate? It doesn't seem to stem from our status as living beings, as we don't balk at killing cows for beef or cutting down trees. It can't be from our status as humans, because we incarcerate our fellow humans, and we are often willing to sacrifice the lives of our fellow humans for broader concepts like national sovereignty. In the case of a war for independence or something like that. It seems descriptively what gives someone rights is their level of consciousness. People with lower levels of consciousness are not afforded the same rights as those with more consciousness. We don't allow, for example, underage people to consent to contracts, to live independently, or even to own property, likewise, or even consent to sexual interactions. Likewise, someone with a profoundly reduced mental capacity may be placed under conservatorship, removing their agency and placing it in the hands of someone else. We also allow, in certain cases, for the killing of people who are permanently brain dead. However, it seems like you heavily imply that rights must be afforded to people by dint of their humanity, and their human DNA. Is this description accurate? And if so, how do you reconcile this belief with basically the rest of our Western canon, moral canon?
Thank you. You had a lot in there, and I want to address it because there's a few things in sort of the question already that I think I would call them mistakes that you're making and how you're thinking about it, which tie back to why I think it is difficult for you to assent to this idea that all humans have human rights. So first of all, you mentioned, if I heard you correctly, you were talking about how in the cases of war or certain cases, it must be clear that the government can, I don't believe all humans have human rights because in the case of war, some humans are being killed. Is that kind of the one part of the original statement you made? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, more like
or incarcerated humans.
There's like a price that a human life can.
Okay, the value of the human life.
Yeah.
So in the case of, let's start with incarceration. In the case of incarceration, the incarcerated criminal has the same human value as the non-criminal. Okay, and they have the same human rights. They have given up certain rights to freedom, freely operating within society because of wrongs that they've committed. They have failed on some of their responsibilities. So everybody has rights and responsibilities. They have failed on certain responsibilities of treating other people in a particular manner that's moral. They have, raped, killed, theft, committed theft, whatever it is. And so they are behind bars, not because they don't have human value, but because they have ultimately given up some of their rights by not fulfilling their responsibilities. And that happens frequently in society, right? In the case of war, certainly individuals who might die in war have the same human value and the same human rights as individuals in any other time, right? And there are such a thing as war crimes, where if you are targeting, as an example, non-combatants, if you're targeting civilians in a war, those would be war crimes that would be unjust killing, and it would be wrong, just like abortion is wrong. So I think the framework, which is the reality of that there is a certain natural order, that there are certain absolute rights and wrongs, and that there are certain absolute human rights that we possess, as well as human responsibilities that we owe. I think it works with some of your concerns or sort of your objections to why, this order can't work because what about war criminal? What about war? What about human incarceration? I think there was a third one, though, that you had besides incarceration and war. Was there a third one?
Like killing brain dead people, or even like conservatorship?
Killing brain, yeah. So in a matter of a brain dead person, so if you are truly brain dead, right? You cannot operate your body. You can't process food. You cannot operate your body without being on life support. So you're not killing a brain dead person by removing them from life support. Life support would be extraordinary care that is being offered to that individual to maybe keep them alive in hopes that they might recover, or maybe they're going to try some life-saving measure to try to resuscitate them in some way. But removing extraordinary care in a medical setting is not killing the patient. Now, it could be killing the patient to remove what is called ordinary care, right? So if I'm like a patient, I'm in a hospital, I'm, recovering from open heart surgery, and then they refuse to feed me or to give me hydration, right? And I die from neglect. That would be not just medical neglect, that would be killing me, right? But unplugging someone on life support, especially in the circumstances of brain death, that is not killing. So there's a very important distinctions that need to be made to show, or to show what is right and what would be right and what would be wrong. And I would also say, you said you were a liberal. There's a lot of liberals who are pro-life.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you don't have to be one political identity
I'm
or
like
another.
liberal in the sense that like the European sense, like the moral foundation or like moral philosophy, instead of like.
So where do you get your moral foundation from? Is there absolute morality?
Well, personally, no. I'm an anti-realist.
So would you say that in some cases rape could be fine?
I mean,
is rape always wrong?
Yes. Wait. Hold on.
Is it?
Yes.
That sounds like moral absolutism.
When I say rape, I have my own morality, but then I also acknowledge that other people may.
Would it be okay? So it sounds like you're saying it would be wrong for you it would be wrong for you to rape someone. Would it be wrong for someone else to rape someone?
I will kill anyone that rapes anyone. That's my.
But
morality.
whoa.
Yes.
But you just said morals are not absolute. So why would it be wrong for someone else who thinks that rape is okay to rape someone?
The idea is from I can't make the justification, right? Because they have different morality and like they have different.
So why would you judge them by killing them?
Because I think my morals are better.
So you do think there's moral hierarchy?
Well, I think my morals should be superior, right? But
do you think some morals are superior to others? It sounds like you think that there is an objective order to the world.
I don't know. This is I haven't thought this deep about it, Yeah, but so I'm sorry.
No, it's good. I appreciate you having the conversation.
I guess when I say I'm an anti-realist, I just mean like
I think you're more of a realist than you're giving yourself credit for.
Sure. I just think that there's just not a good way to argue. Like it's very hard to convince someone out of like their morality, especially if they have this whole like other like kind of network of. So I'll try to argue them out of like if they just believe that rape is good. At the end of the day, there's savages. I'll have to kill them. Like when it comes to it, yeah.
I think you believe in a moral order and you believe in some moral absolutes, but you just don't want to agree that it's morally wrong to kill a baby in the womb. Do you think that's the case? Like you're saying rape is wrong, but abortion's okay.
Yeah, I can be convinced out of it. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Well, I hope that we make progress on that. The pro-life case is very simple. It's always wrong to kill an innocent human being. And that's what abortion is by definition. And that's why we oppose it.
I don't disagree with that. I think that's I think in some cases it's good to kill people.
In some cases it's good to kill innocent people?
No. Well, it depends on... Yes, actually...
When is it good to kill innocent people?
Yeah.
When is it good to kill innocent people?
Well, it depends on like your definition of innocent. Yeah, but sure, yeah.
When is it good to kill an innocent person?
Well, do you think like
you think would be acceptable?
I think like for example, in service of like a higher goal, like for
so
example,
you're a utilitarian.
They're probably
You're a moral utilitarian. If it would serve some other people in some way, maybe a material way or some other way, it's okay to kill the baby. It's okay to kill the 2-year-old.
Well, so like for example, I think like I'm
just curious. Is that your position?
I think they're like you can make a case for like firebombing Dresden. Like I think like people in Dresden might have been innocent, but I think like for the overall goal of like ending Nazism, I think that could have been like that could probably be justifiable, right?
So in that case, so you don't believe that there's such a thing as a war crime against against non-combatant civilians? Because I would say if you're targeting civilians, whether it's in Dresden or it's in Gaza or wherever it is, if you are doing that, and I'm not accusing someone right now of doing that, but if you were doing that, that would be a war crime and immoral to target civilians. Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you, Destiny.
Hi,
Hello, what was your name?
my name is Michael,
Hi, Michael.
and I've seen you in these debates before, and my question is this. During your debating journey regarding this topic, what was the most difficult question you had to answer? And at what point in your journey, in this topic, this debating topic, did you feel like you were ready to answer that question?
What was my most difficult question to answer, and when was I ready? So, not to sound braggy or something, I haven't not felt ready, because I think the pro-life argument is a very straightforward one. I think it's true, of course, and I just don't think that the arguments against it stand, right? So that's why I'm here. Obviously, you guys know I'm passionate pro-life. I think, on a personal level, when someone says, if you could save 10 babies over here, or this baby over here, and you had to pick in a moment of emergency, which would you pick? I mean, those are always, or like 10 men over here, or this, one baby over here, like those kind of crazy life or death scenarios, and who would you pick in an emergency? Sometimes a pro-choice advocate might use a scenario like that to try to prove that some human beings have less value than others, like, oh, because you picked the newborn baby instead of the babies in deep freeze from in an in vitro clinic, the in vitro babies are less valuable. Anyways, on a personal level, if I was actually in that situation where I had to pick between, my baby or some in vitro babies, or this baby and these babies, that would, I'm just talking personally, it's like, I don't want to have to be in an emergency situation where we have to pick where one lives or one dies, but that doesn't change their value, right? When men gave up their life for women and children on the Titanic, right, and gave them the lifeboat, that doesn't mean that the men had less human value than the women or the children. So in a way, that's kind of the most personally, it kind of gets me personally. It's like, I want them all to live. But their human value is the same regardless of who someone saves in an emergency. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that one's always on a personal level, like emotional. But they're the same human. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Did I see you earlier?
Yes, you did.
Nice to see you again. You had great questions earlier.
Thank you.
What was your name again?
I didn't share my name. I'm not
Oh,
gonna
you're
share it
right.
again,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. Can I call you Destiny?
Sure.
Or just
Do you
for
want me to
fun?
be
Okay.
Destiny? Or?
Hi, Destiny.
Hi, I can act as Destiny if you would like.
All right, you're very sharp, so I bet you could if you wanted to.
Okay. Is it fine if I? Okay. I think you're kind of misrepresenting his argument. You started in
Destiny's
your
argument.
Yes.
Okay.
In the opening statement, you started by saying Destiny believes that consciousness is the only factor that really matters for if someone's a person or a human or not.
That's his determining factor for whether or not they're human, yes.
That is incorrect of what his beliefs are.
Okay.
His belief is the capacity to deploy conscious experience. You debated
Okay,
on this previously.
I agree to that. That's a different way to phrase it, but I think the
It
message is
is
the same. But yeah.
inherently different. Saying that consciousness is a factor is one thing, because you pointed to a coma patient.
Mm-hmm.
You've pointed to a sleeping patient in the past. If someone's sleeping, they're not conscious at the moment, right? But they have the capacity to wake up. They have the capacity to deploy a conscious experience. In the same way that someone in a coma had a conscious experience, they have the ability to deploy it. Maybe not right now, but they will in the future. They have in the past is the clear factor there.
I totally hear you, but listen, a baby that has not fully developed their brain yet, right? Because they're still an embryo, as an example. They have a natural capacity for consciousness as a human that is not active yet, because they haven't developed all the structures for it. So I think the same argument you could make for, the person's unconscious, they're still a person, even though they're not conscious, because they're gonna have consciousness when they wake up. Similarly, if you don't kill that embryo, if you let that embryo grow, they will experience consciousness in varying degrees as they grow, as they get older. So I think in a way, you wording that way, specifically the capacity to deploy consciousness, the embryo has a natural capacity to deploy consciousness that if you don't interrupt their development, they will be able to deploy in the future.
That's different, though, from what he's arguing. The difference isn't, sure, they don't have it right now, and they will.
Well, yeah,
develop
that is
it.
different from what he's arguing,
I
because
know.
he's not
But what
pro-life. He
what I'm
thinks you can
saying
kill
is-
that baby.
I'm saying your definition of it. The baby.
Well,
we can call it a fetus.
conveniently, to your point, conveniently, Destiny says, well, yes, but it doesn't matter. I still think you can kill them before they have developed enough of their brain for consciousness.
Let
So
me
yes, that is
explain
his
why
position.
he thinks that. The reasoning is that if you don't have the ability to deploy a conscious experience, right, you're not a person, is his view. The reason for that is if you are a fetus and you do not have a conscious experience before, you don't have the ability to deploy it then, you still need a lot more things. You need nutrients, you need water, you need food, you need all this different stuff. You need to be in the womb. You need all this different stuff to then become of the capacity to deploy the conscious experience. versus if you end that, like human life, if you want to call it that, I think that's still presupposing the argument a little bit.
But
if you want to call it a human life and you end it there, you're not ending a conscious experience.
But
you're not
hold on.
ending anything that has had a conscious experience. You're preventing one from happening,
But-
which is a fully different moral field than ending a conscious experience and ending a conscious experience that has existed
I totally
already.
disagree. I totally disagree. And their dependency, like you're saying, they need, food, nutrition, all of they're totally dependent on their mom. They're going to have that dependency when they're conscious too, by the way.
Well,
Like
yeah.
a baby at 21 weeks in utero has the same dependency as the 19-week baby.
But then the difference
and the
is
newborn
that-
baby also is tremendously dependent. So you're kind of mixing in dependency as some sort of reason that it's okay to kill them.
But
But
the-
dependency doesn't mean it's okay to kill.
The dependency
So-
doesn't mean it's okay to kill, but what I'm saying is the dependency of a baby who has the conscious experience might be limited. I know you like to play around the limited stuff.
It's not playing.
I know
They are
you-
less
I
conscious.
know,
Like
I
a
understand, but
newborn
I'm
baby
saying-
is definitively
I'm saying
less
in debates,
conscious than an older
in debates you like
adult.
to play with that. You say that it's not binary. Consciousness isn't binary.
That's
You're right.
true.
It is. There's a motive
Yeah.
to it. There's a different fluctuation. But the truth is, as
I'm
soon
glad
as
we
it
agree on
happens,
that.
as soon as it exists, that is a binary. There's a binary of having it and not having it. And once you have it, there can be multiple values of it. Sure.
I
right?
understand the position. I
So-
do, truly. But what I'm saying is the fact that someone has not experienced consciousness yet, because in their level of human development, which is totally normal, that we all experienced at one point because we were that 10-week embryo, that doesn't give someone else the justification to kill me because I haven't developed enough of my brain yet to be able to have whatever kind of arbitrary standard of consciousness. Because even at 20 weeks, by the way, one 20-week embryo versus another and their level of detectable consciousness, again, very arbitrary, very hard to define. I've actually asked Destiny before, can you define it? He struggles to define it. And then I say, well, why is human consciousness matter so much to you? Oh, because of the ability for complex language and the ability for reason. Okay, well, the 20-week-old fetus does not have the ability for complex language yet or the ability to reason. So I just think it's a very arbitrary, unjust standard, and using it to justify the mass killing, which is what's happening now, of babies at 19, 18, 17, 16, all the way down, weeks, is profoundly unjust in my view.
The reason why it's not arbitrary is because what are you harming? Because if you're
ending
if I kill
an entire lifetime of
if I
conscious
kill my friend over
experiences.
there, right? It's very clear who I'm harming. I'm killing my friend. I'm ruining their life. I'm killing it. I'm ending their life. I'm ending their conscious experience.
What if you killed him when he was sleeping?
If I
What
kick
if
a-
you killed him when he was sleeping? He wasn't conscious to experience
You're
the
right.
killing.
He wasn't conscious, but I still harmed him. I still ended a life.
So what
Versus,
are you doing to the
I ended the
17-week-old
person.
fetus when you kill
I
him? You're
ended
not
the
harming
person
them?
when I killed the sleeping person. When I end the life of a fetus who hasn't had a conscious experience yet, what am I ending? I'm not ending anything. I'm ending a human development process, but I'm not killing a life.
But my friend, because I don't know your name,
Destiny.
Destiny, you are ending definitively if you're killing that baby at, let's say, 17 weeks.
I'm ending a life. I'm not ending a
you're,
person.
You're ending an entire lifetime, potentially,
But I'm not
of
ending a person.
all kinds of conscious experiences.
I-
You
I'm-
are absolutely ending that, because if
I'm
you didn't
preventing
kill
it, but I'm
them,
not ending it
they
from
would
happening. It
continue
never
to develop.
happened. It never happened, though.
You
the person never
ended
existed.
the potential, that entire potential
I
lifetime that
ended
they
the
would have had.
potentiality of a person, but we end potentialities of things all the time.
Well, you ended it. I think you admitted it was a human life, even in your view, right?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a human life, sure, obviously, but it's
what
not a
we're
person.
quibbling over, what Destiny quibbles over, of course, in his position, is this idea that some humans aren't persons, which I addressed earlier. Some humans aren't persons based on, again, I consider it a very arbitrary standard for multiple reasons, which I kind of referenced, but I could get more into, that they didn't have this first flickering of how they define consciousness. Again, a fetus at 20 weeks, what that consciousness looks like is dramatic. Like they're not self-aware the way that an adult is. It's totally different. There's people like Peter Singer, who is a pro-choice ethicist at Yale. He argues that a baby, a newborn, doesn't have enough consciousness to make it a person, so it's okay to kill a newborn, right? So you can take Destiny's standard of consciousness and you can enter into his the subjective world and say, well, okay, if consciousness is a measure of humanity and this person has so little consciousness, as a newborn, they're less of a person than the 20-year-old, it's okay to kill them for X, Y, or Z reason. And there's arguments being made for that. And my response to that is, that's preposterous in my view. You can argue all kinds of arbitrary standards for this human versus that human is valuable because of this level of development versus that. But my view is that if you are a human, you have human rights, even if you do not have the level of development as the next human. And I do think in human history, all the times that we have put these standards on, whether it's consciousness or it's sex or it's race or it's your age or it's your, your belief system even, or your disability level, right? I mean, that has been a eugenics, in Nazi Germany as an example, they went after disabled people specifically because they were seen as unfit. It's all wrong. It's all human rights violations.
I think you're still kind of not answering the question of what are you harming? You
A
can say
human
it's,
being.
I understand it's a
I will
human
answer
life,
your question.
But I'm saying
I'm
who is
happy to. You're harming a human being.
But who is experiencing that harm?
The human being.
How are they experiencing it? What does it feel
By
like?
not being alive
What does it
afterwards,
feel like?
by being dead.
What does it feel like?
Just because you cannot feel pain doesn't mean it's not wrong to kill you.
But they can feel pain, but they can't know what it's like to interpret it.
It doesn't
necessarily.
matter. Even if someone totally anesthetizes you so that you cannot feel anything and then they murder you, that doesn't mean that
But-
you're not still
But again,
dead
the
and
difference
it's
is
not wrong that they did that to you.
That anesthetized person is still experiencing life. Okay.
No, let's say they're
intaking
totally
things.
knocked out and they're completely numb to all pain.
They're experiencing life before then, right?
But they don't remember it. They're knocked out.
They don't remember
Why does it matter?
Sure, but they still had it before.
Why does
They're
that
going
matter?
to
That's
have
an
it again once
arbitrary
the
standard.
anesthesia
Why
wears
does that
off.
matter so much to you?
The reason why it matters so much inherently, why consciousness, the capacity to deploy a conscious experience matters, is because if we look at a rock, right, does it have the capacity to deploy a conscious experience?
No.
No. When we look at an animal, let's say we take a cow. Can the cow?
The cow has
deploy-
some conscious experience, my friend. Yeah.
I'd agree with that.
Animals do, which, by the way, is another issue with Destiny's argument.
Which I don't.
You could argue.
I don't agree with that part of it.
Hold on. You could argue that a newborn baby, in some ways, has less consciousness than a dolphin.
Sure, but that doesn't mean I'd kill either of them.
Good. I'm glad to hear that, and it should mean that you also don't kill them before they're born
But the
and as
thing is,
developed.
again, if I kill a dolphin, I'm ending something that is currently experiencing something. If I kill a fetus, it's not experiencing anything. And if you point to things like, oh, it can sense temperature,
So-
it can sense pain, the thing is, that all can happen in bacteria as well, and you would still kill a
So
bacteria because it's not
was
experiencing
Helen
something.
Keller? You know Helen Keller, right?
Yeah.
She lacked the ability. She was mute, blind, and could not hear. Was Helen Keller less somehow of a person because she had less of an experience than the next person?
Nope. She was
Okay.
perfectly like all of us. Sure, she had less of an experience, if you want to call it less of an experience.
But you just said that your ability to have an experience makes you a person.
At all. Any experience at all is an experience that we should protect, but having an
experience at all?
Yeah, sure.
So is it wrong so any conscious experience at all we should protect? Is your view?
Probably. I'm curious as to what
Okay,
you're
well,
gonna...
I'm just like curious, like a chicken. Like, is it wrong to kill a chicken?
I would probably say so, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not necessarily
Because they have a
vegan.
so would you say
But I
would you
would
say
probably-
it's so just to be clear, you're saying it's probably wrong to kill a chicken because they have some kind of conscious experience, but it wouldn't be wrong to kill a baby at 18 weeks because they haven't developed enough of a conscious experience.
I
Is
can
that your
point to
view?
exactly what was harming the chicken. I'm pointing to the ending of its existence. If I'm killing a fetus that has no experience...
Aren't
and-
you ending its existence at 17 weeks?
Experience. Experience is different from existence.
So again,
Sorry,
just
let
to
me
be
clarify
clear,
experience.
you would say it's morally wrong to kill a chicken, but it's not morally wrong to kill a fetus at 17 weeks.
Is it really
a human
wrong
fetus.
to break a rock?
So you're saying that the human fetus at 17 weeks is like a rock.
Not necessarily. I'm making an
What
analogy
are
to
you
the two.
saying? What are
I'm
you saying?
saying
Destiny.
I'm saying
Yeah.
that fetus is not currently experiencing anything. It can have inputs, but it's not necessarily experiencing.
Yeah.
It's not interpreting. It's not doing anything.
I
like
understand,
that.
and I'm just saying it's a very subjective, arbitrary standard. It's a moving standard that depends on a lot of
It's
factors,
pretty
and it's
cut
not.
and dry. It's the ability
it's-
to experience and interpret.
Okay, if it's
A
so
newborn can experience
if
and
it's so
interpret.
cut and dried, how can you detect for sure? And would you support this in your framework? Some form of detection, and what would you use to ensure that you knew consciousness had happened in this fetus in order to prove that it's not okay to kill them?
If we could do that and we could measure if experience had occurred, like a
Can we
conscious
do that
experience-
though?
I don't
That's
know.
my question.
I know that
So,
it's
so
possible
here's the question. If we can't even do that, which we can't, by the way, if we can't
have,
even do
though.
that, well, not authoritatively for any given baby, right? If we can't do that, then why is it okay to say, yeah, kill, and they're probably not conscious yet based
the
on
thing
this
is,
arbitrary standard?
We can tell with brain structures what they're able to do, right? Do you have an amygdala?
You can tell with brain structures how the brain may function, but just because you have a brain structure doesn't mean that necessarily it's going to be fully functional.
But
So
again,
there's that point.
I'm
And then-
protecting having those structures
What-
fully developed, or at least developed enough to employ
But here's
experience.
another issue that you may face.
Sure.
Have you heard of the case of the Harvard student who experienced severe hydrocephaly and lost 95% of his brain?
I have
And
not heard of that, no.
So this was like, I don't know, 30 or 40 years ago, and they
Mm-hmm.
were doing these studies on this guy. It was very fascinating. He only had his brain stem left, and he still was able to function and take tests and study, and they measured his IQ. He had high IQ. It's this crazy case that there was something there where he was still him, but he lacked functionally his brain, right? And so, there's a lot of arguments here. We get in the argument for the existence of the soul here, which is a whole other conversation. But this arbitrary standard that your brain being a certain level of development determines your value, your legal protection, I don't buy it. I don't think it's a logical or just argument. I really appreciate it, though. Thank you so much. Hello. What's your name?
My name is Pierre.
Pierre, nice to meet you.
I'm actually not a student here.
Okay.
I drove 2 hours down to talk to you, so.
Thanks for being here. That's
Yeah, of
awesome.
course. I love your work. I watch all your videos. I think you're very, very smart and intelligent. So I'll be really quick. I don't want to take too much time like the others. I'm not a Destiny, so I'm not really here to debate. I just want to quickly ask some questions. But I've noticed that with the mainstream media, they're very. In your opinion, what does the mainstream media get wrong about the abortion debate, and how does that affect your mission, those misunderstandings?
Thanks, Pierre. Thanks for coming out here, too. I think the mainstream media often misreports on abortion. It's very frequent, actually, and even just the word abortion, framing pro-choice or anti-choice or whatever, there's a lot of, I would say, they're euphemisms for what it actually is. It's the killing of a baby, and they just kind of talk about, they'll say like reproductive health care, right? So the terminology they'll use, it's like there's nothing health care about abortion. It's literally killing a baby. You're not keeping anybody healthy with that. The baby's dead. It's not healthy, right? So even just how the media reports on this, calling abortion health care, et cetera, it's like very, very biased. The other big thing that I've seen that drives me personally crazy, it's like, it's so frustrating to see it, is when the media cherry picks these stories, which are really tragic stories of women that say, and this is like, in post-abortion ban Texas is an example, say, oh, well, I was denied care because of the abortion ban, right? And the media runs with the narrative, right? And there's like usually a pro-abortion activist lawyer who gets involved and is saying, this, my poor client. And you look at the actual facts of the case, right? We talk to them, like we work with a lot of medical experts at Live Action as an example. That woman was not denied care because of an abortion law. What almost always is the case with these cases is there was some sort of medical malpractice that they just blame on the abortion law that had nothing to do with the abortion law. So a lot of like the fear mongering in politics today around abortion is like, oh, if you ban abortion, it's going to prevent miscarriage care, right? Women can't get miscarriage care, they're gonna die. And that's completely false, because if the baby has passed away, then removing that baby is not an abortion procedure. It shouldn't be illegal. It's just removing a dead baby, right? And that's a miscarriage. If the baby's still alive, then you try to care for the baby, care for the mom, and help them both live, right? So anyways, that's my probably personal pet peeve in terms of media bias on this topic.
Got it.
Thank you.
I have one more quick question, just really, really quick. So, as technology advances, artificial wombs may one day allow embryos to grow outside the human body. If that became widely available, how do you think it would change the abortion debate, and would it challenge or strengthen your beliefs?
I think it would definitely strengthen my belief, because any technology, it would definitely not weaken the belief that technology doesn't change the reality of human value, right? No matter what our technologies can or can't do. Like the development of the nuclear bomb as an example that can kill, millions of people. That doesn't mean human beings have somehow less value, even though it might be used to harm human beings. So anyways, a technology that could maybe, be sort of like this, external womb kind of technology that you're describing, it can develop the baby without ever a woman being involved. I think it's scary. I don't think it's a good thing to distort the natural order and to do that. I think babies need to be with their mothers, and you open the world up to so many abuses when you go outside of the natural order. That's why I strongly oppose IVF, because you're creating babies in test tubes, and then you're freezing them, and then you're destroying some, and you're selecting some, and it just opens the door to so many abuses. So I would say, largely speaking, I don't think it's a good idea.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Ben. My discussion is partly in reference to a previous discussion about life support, that extraordinary care. I consider the embryo as being on an extraordinary care given by the mother. Given that, I would say the embryo is part of the mother. Following the mother, can remove this care if she wishes. I would say this is wildly different from following the child's removal from the mother. The mother is not putting the child in extraordinary care from there on. It's not okay for the mother to choose to remove this care if she wishes, as the baby is, or the embryo is inside her.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, I would consider this as part of her.
Yeah.
Is she not choosing to change something about herself in this scenario?
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for the question. By definition, a baby developing in their mother's womb is not experiencing extraordinary care. Ordinary care is the basic nutrients that someone needs through an ordinary avenue to survive, right? And to live and to grow. And in the case of a pregnancy, we all started life that way, guys. Everybody. It's not extraordinary that you need your mom before birth to grow. That's how we all started. And we all had the right to, yes, our mother's body to be able to grow. Just like when we were born, we had the right to our parents' care of us. Everybody had that right. Parents have a responsibility, they had the right. If the parent can't deliver on that responsibility for whatever reason, then they then have the responsibility to safely transfer the care of that child to somebody else, right? Which is why if you are pregnant and you feel you cannot care for that baby upon the baby's birth, you have the right to try to safely transfer the care of that child to somebody else, an adoptive family. So I totally just don't buy your premise that pregnancy is extraordinary care. It's very ordinary care, and every one of us benefited from it, and it's what is owed to every child.
The crux of the argument, not the argument, but I would say the discussion is the idea of extraordinary care is not in terms of how much effort is being put into it or what happens in terms of it. As I would say, the idea of it is extraordinary means without that care.
So that's not how I was defining it earlier. It sounds like you're kind of creating a framework and coming up with terms and giving them definitions, which you're free to do. Okay. When I discussed extraordinary and ordinary care earlier, medically speaking, it's having to do with particular kinds of health care that you would give a patient, and what would be considered what is the patient is owed, and it would be wrong to not give them that care, versus what would be an extraordinary measure, more than food and water, more than maybe shelter and clothing, things like that. Maybe it would be an intervention, right? If someone's experiencing cancer, as an example, there would be maybe an intervention that they would get. They don't need to get that. You not giving that to them would not be you killing them or hurting them, even if they die, right? But in that situation, they may opt for it. So there's a lot of complexities here, but no, giving someone, largely speaking, food and water, the basic necessities are ordinary care.
Okay, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Hello, my name's Dylan. I'm studying software engineering. So,
Awesome.
I'm pro-life, but I don't think we need to bite the bullet that a rape victim needs to carry the baby to term. The reason being that there's almost no other situation where we expect somebody to endure pain, especially on the level of bringing a baby to term, unless they signed up for it, such as consenting to the sex and consenting normal pregnancy. So my analogy would be if somebody takes somebody hostage and threatens to kill them if you don't endure pain, and you say no, and they kill that person, they go to jail, not you. So in the case of pregnancy, if a woman is raped and she says, no, I don't want to endure pain to spare this baby, I think the rape, it is murder, but it's the rapist's fault, not hers. So I think he should get the charge.
Yeah, you said you don't think she'd get charged. Is that what you just said?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the charge should go to the rapist, not her.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting argument you're making about like who should be criminally responsible for that abortion if that woman had an abortion, right? I think this idea, though, I think we were buying into a false framework to say that, you know, the birth of that baby is such an evil thing to have her carry that baby longer. You know, maybe it's at this point she discovers she's pregnant, it's another 4 or 5 months, right? It's such an evil, preposterously evil thing, and then that baby should die, right? Because it's so evil. And I think that that's profoundly unfair to that baby. And it's also like assuming that the woman is going to be deeply traumatized. It's like even worse or as bad as the rape to deliver that baby. And it's also assuming that abortion is not traumatic and it's actually great and it's actually she'll feel better after it. So there's so many assumptions that you have built into that perspective that I think are all false assumptions. So that would be my response. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but that would be my response.
Yeah, but in the case of like any other situation, do you think there's any other situation where we say you have to endure pain to spare somebody else?
I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, listen, life is not fair, right? Like there's a lot of bad things that happen like rape in this world. I'm not going to pretend like Pollyanna that doesn't happen. Horrible, horrible things happen in this world. But when something horrible happens to you, right? Because I think there's probably people in this room who have experienced really horrible things. If something horrible happens to you, that doesn't give you license to then do something horrible to someone else, even if you've been so horribly impacted, right? So, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but you know, you don't, again, 2 wrongs don't make a right. You don't heal or solve for the original wrong by doing something else wrong then too. And to get a little personal here, you know, we work with a lot of rape survivors at Live Action and children who've been conceived in rape. And hearing their stories is so illuminating because they talk about how, you know, Liana Reboledo, as an example, she was gang raped at age 12. I mean, it's like you can't even imagine like what she went through, right? And she went to the doctor, found out she was pregnant. She was suicidal, not from the pregnancy, because she was raped, right? And the doctor's like, well, let's give you an abortion, right? And she said, is that going to take away my self-loathing? And he said, well, I can't tell you that. Is that going to take away the trauma? I can't tell you that. Is that going to take away the memories I have of the rape? He says, I can't tell you that. So she says, so why? She had the courage at 12 years old, by the way. This is incredible. She told the doctor, so why would I kill the baby? It's not going to take away the trauma of the rape. And the doctor said, well, I mean, I guess you're right. So anyway, she gave birth to this beautiful little girl that she ended up having. She said, now she goes around the country speaking about this, right? And she says, that little baby, you know, she wanted to kill herself. She was suicidal because she was in so much pain. And she said that little baby, for her, it was a silver lining. It gave her this something to fight for, something to hope for. Now, that her story is not everyone else's story, of course. But I think there's this strong narrative around rape and pregnancy that, oh, you just got to kill the baby to save the rape victim. And that's just false. It doesn't save her. It doesn't heal her. And it adds additional injustice now on top of the original injustice.
The pain, potentially, if she doesn't want to carry the rape baby to term, though.
I mean, if we want to get into the scenarios, like the subjectivity of what she might experience, right? Like you're saying, if she has the abortion, if we want to talk about just her experience, I have talked to personally now hundreds of women, including some survivors of rape who had abortions. Actually, I just interviewed one or 2 weeks ago. She had an abortion after surviving rape, and she was in tears about that abortion that she had, and she wished to God she had never had that abortion because she said, that baby is not with me today. I didn't give that baby a chance. So we can't assume about individual experiences because they are all different. But what we can say, the principle of the matter, is that 2 wrongs do not make a right. Thank you so much.
Hi, Lila. My name is Nick. I am pro-life, but I basically just wanted to find the hardest possible question to ask you.
Okay, Destiny, let's do it.
Well, I did come here for a debate, so I didn't get one, so I have to ask a tough question.
Let's do it.
But if abortion is banned or severely restricted, how do we ensure that women experiencing non-viable pregnancies can still access timely life-saving care, especially in areas without proper medical infrastructure and in rural areas around the world which don't have the budget to support this type of things?
Okay, so when you say non-viable pregnancy, just to be precise here, are you talking about a baby that is dead? Or are you talking about a baby that has a disability that may die?
Well,
What
when
do
I
you
was-
mean by non, because this is another media
Yeah.
euphemism that's used a lot, this idea of a non-viable pregnancy. What
Yeah,
do
when-
you mean by that?
When I was researching it, I was more looking at fatal fetus diagnoses.
Okay, that's what I
Yeah.
was kind of assuming. So in a fatal fetal diagnosis, right? That's when the child has such a severe abnormality or disability that the doctor's saying this baby is gonna die, right? The baby is not dead yet, and they're alive, so they may die, but you don't know for a fact that they'll die. By the way, there are many children who are given a fatal diagnosis and then they live, sometimes a very long time. Baby Jax, I was just talking to someone earlier about that, the other Destiny on the quad about that. But this baby, they said he's gonna die. He's gonna die. He has hydrocephaly. He doesn't have a brain. He's missing almost all of his brain. The boy lived. It was a beautiful little boy, big blue eyes, blonde hair. He grew to be 5 years old. Passed away at 5, but he was loved by his family for the years that he had him. So, anyways, my point here is we don't know when someone's gonna die for sure. And it's never right, even if they are going to die for sure. But by the way, we're all going to die for sure one day, I think. But even if they are going to die for sure, right? They have a severe disability. That doesn't give someone the right to kill them. So I think that language is so deceptive to be like, oh, they're incompatible with life. Okay, well then let nature take its course as it will with all of us. But it's wrong for someone else to go kill somebody else.
Oh, I was more asking on the regards of like, in terms of the mother. Well, say
You're
if
her getting good health care, you're asking about? How's she
No.
going to get good health care? Or, okay,
My
go ahead.
question was more along the lines of like, if we look at rural areas of the world and they don't have access to that. So say the baby does die, how does the mother get the proper health care? And like in this scenario.
Well, I mean, it depends on the region we're talking about, because obviously the healthcare systems or lack of systems are going to be so different. But I don't see how, if you're saying that, poor healthcare infrastructure as an example, if there's poor healthcare infrastructure, that doesn't mean abortion is somehow going to solve the poor healthcare infrastructure or is just. So, while I agree with you that there's, a ton of conversation we could have about healthcare systems, poor or better healthcare systems, that's a very different question than whether or not it's okay to commit an abortion.
Well, it was
And-
never,
and-
the-
yeah,
it was
go
never
ahead.
the question of. Well, obviously, I'm
Yeah.
not in favor of the abortion. I'm never saying that it is right, the
Sure.
solution that there's an abortion, but I'm just saying the alternative to the fact that the baby does die at that longer stage, what does the mother do from there? Like, because I don't,
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that, so I'm
So
just wondering.
so you're kind of saying, well, there's this pro-abortion argument to say we need abortion, especially in poor healthcare systems, because they don't have the capacity to deal with a baby with all these disabilities. Is that kind of the argument you're speaking to, or?
Well, this is also kind of a lot of my friends believe that, well, people that I also interact with, like in more political scenarios, who argue with me saying that abortion should be legal because of those scenarios, in the sense
Right.
that abortion, well, they often say that abortion is the only answer to saving the mother's life.
Right.
And then I'm just stuck here saying, I don't know what to say.
Yeah,
to
I hear
that.
you. I totally hear you. And there are a lot of people who say that. It's a myth. It's a myth. Unfortunately, it's one that's kind of sunk its teeth into a lot of people. Oh, we need abortion for health care. Women are going to die. It's not true. And there was, in states like Texas, abortion is illegal, and women are not dying because of abortion being illegal. In fact, children are living because abortion is illegal. There are lives that are being saved actively. So, I know hundreds of pro-life physicians that would never commit an abortion, but they're able to provide excellent care to all manners of pregnancies that have different issues. So it's unfortunately a really bad myth that's seized, I think, a lot of people's minds that, oh, we need abortion for healthcare. It's just not true. Now, there may be cases, and this is where some people get kind of confused, where there may need to be an early delivery of a baby, and then you try to, wait and see on the pregnancy, do bed rest so that the baby's old enough to survive when the baby's born. That's all good, right? That could be a pro-life management of a situation. But it would be, a doctor who's maybe in support of abortion be like, well, just have the abortion. You can get pregnant again later. I've literally had friends, by the way, who have had, I'll just share this personally. My brother and his wife, one of their children, is missing his hand. And because of maybe amniotic bands, they're not sure exactly why this abnormality happened. Anyways, they did the ultrasound. It was 19 weeks they found this out, the fetal anatomy scan. The doctor says, we can do termination. You can get pregnant again over the kid's hand, right? It's horrific, right? But this is our healthcare system. The baby's not perfect. If the baby has a diagnosis that's bad, just terminate, kill the baby, try again later. It's a very eugenic society. It's a view of, oh, if you're not good enough, you don't make the cut, we're going to off you. We're going to kill you. They don't use those terms, of course, but that's what they're really doing. And so I think I would just push back on your friends and be like, hey, I hear what you're saying, but that is a myth. Live Action actually has a really great pro-life replies video where it's a doctor explaining this. Some people are like, Lila, you're not a doctor. I'm like, definitely not a doctor. You are correct. But I work with, thankfully, a lot of doctors. They can share if you want to hear it from a doctor, hear it from a doctor, and they'll share abortion is not medically necessary, and this is why. So thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Again, this event was hosted by Anteaters for Life, but we are endless and tremendously grateful for Lila and everyone involved.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.